Today we're going to do something I've wanted to talk about for a while, and that is, I like role-playing. I like playing D&D, but more importantly, I really love playing Pathfinder. But unfortunately I haven't been able to do it for a while, because unfortunately where I live, nobody seems to play it. I can't find a group together, and even though I have access to the internet, I just can't seem to find a good place where I can, find some people to join on their online adventure type of thing. And the nearest places are where I could go and play it in person are Huddersfield and Sheffield. The only problem is travelling there and back. It's a bit of a pain in the ass. You're talking at least probably about an hour to get to Huddersfield, and again, these places where they want you to play, well, where they play are in the city centre, and parking in the city centre is a bit of a pain in the ass. But anyway, enough about that. I'm going to talk about, as you may have seen the title of the video, is guns in fantasy role-playing RPGs. This is a far bigger issue than I ever really thought, because when I first started playing, I always used to play as a thief, and I really enjoyed playing as a thief. In fact, again, if I had the option, I either play as a gunslinger, or a gunslinger first if I can, or I play as a thief. And when I first got my hands on Ultimate Combat, I initially bought it for the fact that it had ninjas and samurai as a class in there. And I thought, oh, great. Something a little bit different, maybe basically really all a ninja is sort of a really hyped up assassin and gets a bit of a exotic weapon efficiencies and stuff that he can use. But then, right on the very first page, well, in fact, yeah, I think it's the first class, yeah, it is, the first new class you come to, is the Gunslinger. And immediately reading it, I absolutely loved it. I love the idea, I love the concept of it, but the question is you always come up against, depending on what type of person is DMing your game, is they will either allow or disallow you, because basically they don't want gunpowder in their fantasy setting. And if it's just you, to be honest, I mean, this is a bit of advice, but if you ever come across a point where you say to the DM, I want to be a gunslinger, and I want guns to be a martial choice, not an exotic choice. I'll get into that later. Sometimes you have a bit of a kerfuffle, because the first thing they'll go is, oh, but we're in a medieval setting, it's not historically accurate. Guns first started appearing around about the 14th century, particularly in Europe. So the historical accuracy, you're talking, think about the creatures you will probably be fighting. You'll be fighting, dragons, Historically accurately, there weren't many dragons in, 13th, 14th and 15th century, so sort of a bit of a bad idea for the argument. The second argument is oh, it's aesthetics, it just doesn't fit with the choice. And this is the point where you've either got to say, it's probably, if you've got the group on your side, then you can probably get the GM to agree with it. However, if it's a case that no one's on your side, or it sort of splits the group, I wouldn't bother. But the argument to make if that comes up is, and I found that this works. Well, most of the time it works. I don't know. See if people agree with it or not. But magic is a dominant force in this, in the world we're playing. But think about the people that aren't magic or don't have any magical training. How then are, your average Joe who might not have, trained as a warrior or have very limited skill sets, in training, how is he meant to, take on a wizard who could, throw fireballs at them, turn them to stone, spray them with acid? But then again, that also comes with the fact of, well, you look at alchemists, because I always make the point, well, if you're going to ban the gunslinger, then you've got to technically ban the alchemist as well, because the alchemist is making up potions and substances like that are not, that are potentially real world substances, because that's the sticking point. But if you make that, if you make the argument that that guns are the equalizer, and that they sort of even the playing field between a mage and an average person, and then you've got to come into the question of, what do you want guns to be? This is where I'd argue is, don't go too technologically far. Don't bother at all with breech loading guns, because if you do go breech loading, you'll find that it changes combat entirely, because most of DMs that come across, or the second you say, I want a gunslinger, sooner or later the DM is going to introduce a group of enemies who have guns, and the last thing you want is not specifying how far you want it to go, and the DM thought, instead of giving them muzzle loading guns, I'm going to give them breech loaders, and you're pretty much screwed, because here I am with a gunslinger, and I've got my flintlock pistol that can shoot one round, and then my enemy's got a revolver that can shoot 6 bullets in one turn. You see, there's a bit of you've got to make sure that you establish you want flintlocks, not muzzle loading weaponry, not breech loading, and you've got to make sure that you don't cross that gap, because also thematically as well, I highly advise anyone who hasn't played a gunslinger, I'd say play a gunslinger. You'll find it in the first couple of levels to be rather difficult, but the further you go in level, the more rewarding it gets. And a bit of advice I'd give to gunslingers is have more than one gun. Purely for the fact that you've got to go bang. You've now got to reload. And I can't remember when you get rapid reload for guns. I think it's at the 3rd or 4th level you get rapid reload. It might be even later. I'm sure someone will correct me. I could just look it up, but never mind. So always make sure you have at least more than one gun. And since you have the gunsmith talent as well, make sure that your guns are always at master level. It solves a lot of your problems, and master level guns are a lot easier to fix or solve if they're at master level. So why should you always have more than one gun? Well, obviously, bang. Now, most GMs will come after you, because at low level, guns are quite powerful. However, the higher you get, they're sort of really strong to begin with, early levels, and then they sort of hit this peak, and then they sort of teeter off really, because eventually magic does surpass the guns, and there are ways to get around that. You'll see soon. But this is where you get. This is where you can go, badoom. You pull out another one, badoom, 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 and you know, I think the most. This is a pistolero I had as one of the archetypes, and I think I had about 6 pistols on me at one time. Not to mention the coat pistol I had concealed up in my sleeve as a just in case, as a final weapon of last resort. But I always went, as soon as we started, I went, right, bang, reholster, pull out my next one, bang, reholster, bang, reholster, bang, and then I get down to my final 2, and I'd reload. That would stay at that, and I would reload, and then I'd have my other pistol as a just in case if anyone was getting a bit too close, and then I'd fire it off at them. And again, this is why you have a coat pistol, because if, again, say for example you're facing a boss and all of a sudden that boss decides, well, he doesn't like you firing those guns at him, he's going to come after you, then pulling out that other gun, other flintlock, is going to do a bit more damage than your coat pistol. However, a coat pistol is a lot easier to conceal. So if you ever get captured, and eventually you do, coat pistol is always good to have. The next issue you get into is pricing. My God, the pricing. If you are playing a gunslinger, pack as many bullets and doses of black powder as you can, because to get a new, the suggested price in the book is, I think it's a gold and 1 silver. And if you think of a course of a campaign, how many battles and how many bullets you might shoot in just one battle, I'd say average out, you're talking at least 10 gold, possibly per battle. There's, you know, it can get really expensive, and you've also got to think, you know, early level gold rewards tend to sort of be maybe about 100, 200 gold, something like that. So almost immediately, that gold is spent replenishing your ammo that you've expended, and you don't have a lot of money to play with. So the other thing you need to talk with the DM is to make sure that it's sensible to have them at least a better price. A silver is a more decent price than a gold for what you want. But then again, there are spells which you can use. I think it's 5 pounds of lead to turn into like 30 bullets. So if you've got a wizard, see if they try and get them to take that, because it will help you out a bit more. And the final thing that I think is probably the best thing about Gunslingers is alchemical cartridges. This is one of the reasons why I sort of fell in love with the Gunslinger. Because if you've ever seen Outlaw Star, the character Gene Starwin has what is called a caster, which is basically a gun, and it's a single shot gun with basically magic spell bullets, and when they are shot they create tornadoes, lightning, black holes, things like that. And you can have alchemical bullets or alchemical cartridges, and it only takes, I think it's 1 rank in Alchemist, I think it is, and you can create fire bullets, acid bullets, you can create an acid spray from your gun, and all sorts of, there's more in there, but there's brilliant things you can do with it. So, and again, grease, you can have a bullet where if someone's running towards you, oh, grease, boom. That can be quite fun. The other point I want to do is, in the book there are suggested levels of what you should have guns at. And if anyone plays D&D or Pathfinder, you'll know that weapons tend to come in 3 categories of exotic, martial, or simple. Now basically the idea is a simple weapon anybody can use. Basically you can pick it up and use it straight away, you need no training. A martial weapon is you're pretty good at using swords, you've had training, and you know how to handle a sword, basically. That is sort of you know the ins and workings out of a sword fighting, or in this case, since we're going guns, you know how to work a gun. And then exotic is the top level of, I'd say, weaponry, where they are basically exotic items or exotic weapons which are not common in everyday occurrence, so you would need a lot more training to use the weapon, and when you use an exotic weapon and you don't have the training for it, then there are penalties. And I'd say that because you are a gunslinger and you have the ability, the gunsmith talent as well, you pretty much already know how to use a gun. And this is one thing that I've always annoyed me, but crossbows in reality are quite complex. They have lots of, big hand cranks, to wind up the crossbow, and they are quite a complex piece of machinery. They're quite difficult to make and manufacture, and if you don't know how to use a crossbow, it'll take a while for you to reload it. So always see if you can get guns, particularly if you're a gunslinger. This is why I always say specialise. Probably the best ones are either a musketeer or a pistolero. I would always go for pistolero. I don't know why, but I think they are the best archetype gunslinger class. So that is my my espousing of the gunslinger, and I do like it as a class. Hopefully I'll get to play it again soon, because I'm really, really itching to play a Pathfinder game again.